All right. I've got my good morning coffee. I've got my radio on. I don't know if you can hear it. Here's a little sound sample just in case you can hear it. I don't know. I don't remember. I do know I don't have a connection right now, but I can go ahead and make the videos. And I do have my windows or my tabs open up here, as you can see. I would really love to put a jigsaw puzzle together, but without a connection I can't get it loaded, as you know, and do a couple searches and maybe shop a little and this, that, and the other thing that I'm known to do throughout my life for what my little life is. But the thought of the morning is, with that almost minute-long intro, okay, you gotta kind of put yourself in the shoes of the so-called rapist. You know, and hope you don't get dragged under. Excuse me, but because this is virtual reality, pardon me so terribly much, being this rainy kind of weather and cold. Okay, virtual reality can try to walk his walk without actually falling in. You know, if we were sitting on my deck, for instance, going, you know, you really ought to try out this guy's life for a minute, see how it works. Let's have a coffee. All right, so if he had it so good, you know, he had this rape fantasy, you know, a rapist dream come true. You know, nobody bothering him. She's not turning anybody in except for me. She's not turning him in. Let's flat blank it out there. Nobody from the family is coming down and saying, hey, we haven't seen you for 13 years. And mainly it was the ex-wife, and it was a little more than 13 years. I guess when it all began, it was 13 years, though. We first started getting the notices from John's family with the newspaper clippings and stuff. It may have been 13 then, but the word of it, anyhow, if not the clippings, they came shortly after. Okay, so he's got this so-called 2100-time fantasy rapist dream come true. I mean, because if your victim's not even gonna mention you any time at all until the very end, where it's a magnanimous 2100 times, well, that's pretty much a fantasy thing, isn't it? Okay, took her to therapy, let her go to church, let her go to visitation, let her this, that, and the other, you know, with my parents. Then why was it so easy for him to just drop it and walk off? Like, hey, John, you're this 2100-time crazy rapist. Oh, okay. Drops it, cops a guilty plea, no DNA, no nothing. And okay. Why didn't he fight it? If something is so good, 2100 times excellent, then why isn't he more interested in trying to keep that going? And while I'm at it, why isn't she more interested in trying to get it stopped long before it reached that number? Do you get it, people? And two, look at what all he didn't have to do as a father. That was all sloughed off on the state or the county, whichever, both. Don't have to teach this hardhead how to drive. Don't have to put up with the pains of prom dresses. Don't have to meet all these guys that may date her, go over the sermonette of you have her home by 10 sharp or you're gonna get it, buddy. Didn't have to have her fitted with braces. Didn't have to anything first car or college or camp. So I mean, for the budget minded, which is at the time us 100% budget minded. How much did he save? He saved a whopping amount. Or we didn't have to pay her on the insurance for, driving. Didn't have to go through any of that. So, 25 years. If you can figure out how to do the math, let me know. He saved of hard labor, having to afford all that. So, if you're going to look at it that way, it's adios, girly girl. No big deal, especially not a big a deal as everybody would like to make it out to be, especially when I can set it down like an item at a rummage sale and walk on, keep walking. And that's another thing, the understanding of just simple things like walk on. Okay, to his daughter, walk on wouldn't mean what you and I might consider walking on. It would be to get on something and walk on it. Her concept was all screwy. Okay? So every once in a while I would have to back it up and go, how do I phrase this? How do I phrase it into La La Land language? And I wasn't ever really trying to be mean. It was so frustrating that I've got to translate this into codename Nicha understanding. Like, for instance, pick up the beat. Okay, where is it? I'll go pick it up. And I sometimes would just think she's just doing this to make me mad. And I just kind of let it blow over, But for the frugally minded, how much do you think we saved? Doing it John's way. I think we saved quite a number of thousands of dollars. Is what I think. Think about it. And the frustration of a father trying to teach his only daughter how to drive. And the dating scenario. Like, who really needs it? And again, I'm not trying to be mean. I'm just trying to point out the reality, the reality of it that was totally blown off, overlooked, overshadowed, ignored, hidden. The reality that I know the reality of it to have been. And other people, even though my mom and dad are now dead and they were my, at the time, two biggest older adult witnesses. And Mrs. Cook, the neighbor, she's gone too, because his daughter would sometimes like to go over there and just hang out, same as I did before she came along. Just go sit and have a coffee with Mrs. Cook and talk and look at the stuff on her kitchen walls. You know, she had all these little things hanging around like old people collect, you know what I mean. She'd go over there, and one time she did scoop the walk. We had a big snow. And she was saying, oh, it's just that I want to. Okay, you want to, go ahead and go do it. It was one of the only times she offered actually to do something without it needing to be told to her to do. So I think Mrs. Cook gave her something like $4. But see, she had Bradley, when they went to Sunday school and church, the bus would sometimes pick him up if my mom and dad were out of town. And so if Bradley was at our house, she would have to get on the bus with him. Well, she left his little hat one time. It really didn't amount to much. It was like a dollar store hat or something for $1. But I made her pay for that hat. You know? Because my mother was always that way to me, you know. I don't care if it's a 2-cent hat, you're going to pay for it. So, and my mother didn't sue people, but she had this strict thing about the respect of other people's property and belongings. So, that was my rant actually this morning, is the frugality of, excuse me, I had to get a cup of coffee, or a cup of coffee again. The frugality of my husband John just throwing his hands up at that point. Knowing it's fully in her head when something's in someone's head that way, whether they're making it up or whether it's just in their head that way, it's in their head. To them it's real. You know? So why try to fight retardation? And like I said before, we're almost through it. My perps don't seem to relent at sometimes. They just, mostly my perps are sexual in nature. And they're really, really interested in my personal sex life, which I don't have, but they're trying to push in that direction. Trying to get me to go out too, because see, part of his daughter's story was that I was gone. And so I can feel them kind of hanging around like birds on a wire. Why doesn't she go anywhere? Go somewhere, go somewhere. Well, if you'd go see these people. But that's just the whole thing with me. They didn't exist. I don't know why they aren't as dedicated in their life to their own life, rather than being those birds on that wire trying to tell me how I should be living. Basically, and I typed it on Facebook the other day, but I still can't go there without a signal. We'd been henpecked to death by family services. They're henpeckers. And that's not a very good way to be. They have their own family, whether they get paid or not. Who wants to be henpecked about their own life? And ours in particular, like I'd mentioned before, if she had been more involved in her own little world, maybe her own son wouldn't have turned out to be a cocaine dealer. Think about it. While she was standing in my front room, exclaiming how dysfunctional our life was, and it wasn't. It was a little different from hers because we were sober and she was this big wino. She could have been working on her own dysfunction and straightening it out before it escalated to what it did with her son's name splashed across the papers. So, think about it. Denise, you hear me? You're the dysfunctional one, not me.